now that we've had a little bit more time to digest this Israel Adesanya win, I went on First Take Monday and suggested that this is one of the biggest singular wins in MMA history. And the psychology of being down 3-0 and not waiting and letting Alex Pereira fight Robert Whittaker, right? Making sure that you controlled the history. As daunting a task as this was, and now not only did Adesanya control the history, but he makes the best kind of history and has, I think, of all the 4 wins in this series, the most significant of them, this knockout of Pereira last weekend.
Yeah, John, I'll tell you, as the days go on, I'm more blown away like each day when I think about it. And I was 100% wrong. I picked Alex to win. I thought he was coming back too soon. But after watching that knockout, he 100% dragged him in, covered up, took whatever he had, and man, when he unloaded. So, like again, you're saying it psychologically. How do you're down kind of 3-0, 1-0, and obviously in MMA, but you've been knocked out, you've been stopped twice. Coming back on a short notice like that, I think speaks volumes to where this guy is mentally, man. Like I have a total different appreciation for him. Like I always know he was talented and was obviously one of the great fighters, but this was different, man. He put his balls on the line, man.
Yeah.
No risk, no reward type of thing. And he deserves every accolade he gets from this, because this was not, I didn't see it as, it's hard enough to lose to a guy and come back and beat him, right? In boxing, they always said that was the definition of greatness, is that, like Sugar Ray Robinson, he would come back and beat guys that beat him. This was big, man, and he did it in short notice. I don't know why I'm going with boxing, but I almost think like when Duran beat Leonard, Leonard wanted that rematch as quick as possible because he knew the weight would be a problem for Duran. Like, I don't know if that played into it because, the other guy's huge, and obviously I think he said he's going up to 205 now, but I'm saying genius on this, but you could be smart, but you still got to be able to execute. And holy shit, did he execute at a time when I thought, John, that it was not going his way. You know what I mean? So hats off to him, man. And I think psychologically that's the biggest takeaway from me is where this guy is at mentally. That this is a different cat for sure.
He's a mental giant. And although many people would still argue Anderson Silva as the greatest middleweight champion in UFC history, look at all this man has accomplished in 5 years. He made his UFC debut February of 2018. And look at the wins list. Anderson Silva's on it. Yoel Romero is on it. Robert Whittaker, the future Hall of Famer, is on it twice. Marvin Vettori, Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier, Derek Brunson, all the guys that have comprised this era and flirted with the top 5. He's beaten all of these guys, and I think he's won maybe 8 title fights in a span of 5 years. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and all of this stuff too. It's really where you're at in like. Who's pushing you, where the media is at, you know what I mean? Who's behind you, who's not behind you. Anderson Silva had a great push at a great time. But I think what you just laid out makes it pretty obvious that Izzy's the man. I mean, I don't know. And you're going to get a lot of, blowback from people that loved Anderson Silva. And,
sure.
And of course, Anderson Silva was a great fighter. But I think when you put down what you just laid out with the opponents, and I think it might be a no-brainer. You know what I mean? But you never know which way the media is going, how much push you get. The company was definitely behind Anderson Silva. It seems more than Izzy, believe it or not. But that could just be me because I'm not following everything every second of the day, but.
No one's going to argue Leon Edwards as the greatest welterweight of all time. I actually think it would be interesting to see a prime George St. Pierre fight a prime Leon Edwards, but Leon hasn't lost in forever. And Kamaru Usman was a guy who a lot of people started to talk about in those GSP terms, and he's got 2 head-to-head wins over him, both of them with their own sort of value. So I don't know. I just think based upon what I have seen from Israel Adesanya and based upon the era in which he's competing, for me, I think it can be argued that he's the greatest UFC middleweight champion of all time, but it's a cosmetic conversation anyway.
Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you, with a lot of this stuff with Leon, Usman and everything, like if you favor boxing, you're going to look at every fight from a boxing perspective. If you're a kickboxer, it's a kickboxing. But, if you're a wrestler, it's a wrestling perspective. So if you're a striker, Leon Edwards, by far what he's done is unbelievable. You know what I mean? If you're a wrestler, you're probably going to lean towards Usman. I think it's human nature, but, they're all just great fighters, man. I don't even like having those conversations because I think I don't know, they're unfulfilling. These guys, you put your balls on the line and you rattle off 11 wins in a row. I mean, just statistically, that's not easy to do, So
Alex Pineda has said his next fight is going to be at 205 pounds, but he also qualified it by saying that he can make 85 whenever he needs to. And that is absolutely the case. He methodically got himself to a position where he has now mastered this weight cut. I don't expect him to all of a sudden put on a bunch of weight in order to realize success at 205. I wouldn't be surprised to see him bounce between divisions. But let's get to Israel Adesanya. Eugene Behrman and others have talked about who might be next for him. Seemed as though Eugene Behrman, I believe in a conversation with Ariel Helwani, was very dismissive of Khamzat Chimaev as the number one contender because Khamzat hasn't competed at 85. And I know your guy Chris Weidman still has to get through this comeback fight in July, but Chris Weidman is a future Hall of Famer. He has one of the biggest names in this division. He was the guy that vanquished Anderson Silva back in 2013. So if Chris Weidman comes back in July and say he fights like Sean Strickland and beats a guy like that, it ain't out of the realm of possibility that your guy Chris Weidman could find himself back in a middleweight championship situation against Israel Adesanya. I'm just saying. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I think that's the nature of the sport. I think that's how Alex even got the shot, right? He didn't have a lot of experience, but there was a storyline behind there, and it played out to Alex's favor, and now it played out to Izzy's favor. But no, Weidman, look, I don't, with the injury, I talked to him after the submission match. He said he was happy to be back in there. He tested his leg, even though it didn't go his way. It was a positive experience for him. And look, man, these injuries. Oh. This is brutal, man. Look, if anybody could do it, it's fucking Weidman. I mean, he is getting older, and I don't know. I mean, I could tell you if he was younger, there's absolutely no question in my mind what happens.
Right.
So there's still a lot on the table for him, but he did say he felt great, and it was great to be back in there. And look, on every given, I've never seen the guy really have a problem in the training room with it, like any wrestling guy that's still good. He still competes, man. You know what I mean? He's still in that, he still has it. So,
well, he's not going to accept the number 40 guy in the world, and they're not going to offer him the 40th ranked middleweight in the world. Weidman's going to be 39 years of age in June, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that he fights someone like Roman Dolidze or Dricus du Plessis, potentially trying to help build one of those guys to see if they can take out the former champion. I don't know. I didn't plan to go down this Weidman deep dive with you today, but as I was thinking about guys like Roman Dolidze and the lack of an obvious number one middleweight contender right now, I hearken back to a conversation I had with Weidman in Miami. He was there as a guest fighter, and crazier things have happened is all I'm saying. Now, in terms of Adesanya, go ahead.
Yeah, my last conversation with him, I thought that Dricus, if I'm saying his name right, I thought that's the fight for him. I like that fight for him.
Du Plessis just had surgery for a deviated septum, but knowing the South African Du Plessis the way I do, he's not going to idle. He's probably going to try to fight in July. And I think a Weidman-Du Plessis fight makes a lot of sense. Now, Adesanya won't even utter the South African's name, and it seems like there is already sort of a foundation for those two fighting. Adesanya taking exception, I think, with his Africanism or whatever it is, right? But Du Plessis needs another fight. I really firmly believe that, even though he hasn't lost in the UFC yet and he is fresh meat, so to speak. I think Du Plessis got to have one more fight. So,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
I look, no offense. The guy's a gamer, seems like a great guy, but that's an easy fight for Izzy. There's no question about it. He's definitely doesn't, to me, and I'm not criticizing. It just doesn't look like he's ready for that level, especially John, what we saw Saturday night. The guy's on another level to me at this point. He really is. That was a biggie.
Yeah, I think other than Robert Whittaker, Adesanya is going to be minus 300 or north of that against any of these 185 pounders. And I do believe that Du Plessis is just getting started.
Yes, without a doubt.
Mornay Visser's a great coach, but I do think more developmental time is needed.
Yeah.
I have talked to Du Plessis about just getting a 5-round fight before he gets to a championship fight, and I think that's a big initiative for him. South Africa's not getting done in 2023. I think even 2024 is ambitious, but we'll see what happens. One thing that the Adesanya camp, though, has talked about is not trotting out one of these guys that he's fought before, and even though Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori and Jared Cannonier are all riding winning streaks, those guys are not going to be next. I don't think a Whittaker trilogy is going to happen right now, even though certainly I would sign up to see that fight every day of the week. Some people have suggested that maybe Adesanya could move up to 205 right now and fight Jamal Hill. I think there's enough going on at light heavyweight where you don't need to inject Adesanya into the equation. But it is interesting because, as I said on Monday, for the first time in Adesanya's career, he didn't have any motivation to spin it forward on fight night. And as we've sort of outlined here, there isn't an obvious number one contender unless I'm missing someone.
Look, I think the only fight to make it 85, I don't care if he's fought there or not, is Khamzat.
I do too.
That's the only fight to make. All the other names you mentioned, they're not beating him. You know what I mean? The Jamal Hill fight is interesting, but that's a big step up too.
Well, Islam Makhachev's first title defense was a super fight fighting another champion. And are they going to do that again? Right? Not to say that Adesanya isn't worthy. He was reluctant, actually, to fight Jan Blachowicz when he moved up and did it. That seemed to be more spearheaded by Eugene Behrman, if memory serves. But I don't know that Adesanya wants to go belt chasing at 205 necessarily right now. But with the lack of an obvious number one contender, if Yuri Prochazka is not healthy, would you be surprised to see Jamal Hill and Izzy fight in 3 or 4 months? I know they're boys, but I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I didn't even know they were boys, but that wouldn't surprise me. But I'm telling you, the fight to make is Khamzat.
I agree. You and I are aligned, even though Khamzat Chimaev hasn't competed at 85 in the UFC. He's the number one welterweight contender as far as I'm concerned with respect to Bilal Muhammad and everybody else. Khamzat Chimaev is leaving the division as the number one contender. I wouldn't be surprised if he is given every opportunity. Whittaker sort of intimated that Khamzat has a hard time moving around, so perhaps that's part of the issue.